Picture this for a second. You're 64 years old and you wake up without that dull ache behind your eyes. Your blood pressure reading is steady. You take your morning pills, and for once, you don't wonder if one of them is quietly working against you. You walk into your next checkup, and instead of nodding along to whatever the chart says, you ask one sharp question and you actually understand the answer. That's where I want to get you by the end of this video. Right now, though, the picture might look a little different. Maybe you're still taking the same painkiller you took at 40, same brand, same dose, same bottle in the same drawer. Maybe that heartburn pill has been sitting on your nightstand so long you genuinely can't remember when you started it. Even if you're watching this at 52 or 55 and 60, still feels a few years away. This is exactly the kind of thing worth understanding now before it becomes urgent. Here's the uncomfortable part. The pill didn't change. You did. After 60, your liver clears medication more slowly than it used to. Your kidneys filter less efficiently, and your blood vessels lose some of the elasticity they had 20 years ago. So a drug that was perfectly safe at 45 can behave completely differently inside your body today. Same pill, same dose, a very different outcome. Think about it like a mail delivery system. At 45, packages move through quickly, sorted, processed, delivered on schedule, no backlog. After 60, the same system is running with fewer trucks and a smaller crew. Packages still arrive. They just sit on the loading dock a lot longer than they used to. Medication works the same way. It doesn't disappear from your system the moment you swallow it. It lingers, it accumulates, and it interacts, especially if you're taking more than one thing at once, which most men over 60 are. I want to be clear about something before we go further. This is not one of those throw out your medicine cabinet videos. I don't do those, and honestly, I'd be worried about anyone who does. Today, I'm walking you through 5 groups of medication that deserve a second look after 60. Some need a prescription. Others you can grab off a pharmacy shelf without ever speaking to a pharmacist. If you're a man in your 50s or 60s, chances are you're already managing at least 1 or 2 prescriptions. Blood pressure, cholesterol, maybe something for the prostate. Those aren't the focus today, and most of them are fine, monitored, and doing what they should. What we're covering are the ones that quietly ride alongside those prescriptions. Painkillers, heartburn pills, sleep aids, cold medicine, and one very familiar daily habit without ever getting the same level of scrutiny. And the 5th one on this list is going to surprise a lot of you. It's a pill so common, so trusted, that for decades it was handed out to almost everyone as simple automatic protection. Millions of people still take it every single morning without a second thought. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that advice quietly changed, and why it might not apply to you anymore. There's also one specific question that I'm going to hand you halfway through this video. It's the exact thing to ask your doctor at your next visit. Skip that part, and you'll walk away with 5 interesting facts and no actual plan. Stay with me, because the plan is the whole point. But before we go any further, I need to say something clearly, because it matters more than anything else in this video. Nothing you hear today is a reason to stop taking any medication on your own. Please don't do that. Stopping a blood pressure pill, a blood thinner, or a heart medication abruptly can be far more dangerous than any side effect I'm about to describe. Everything here is meant to start a conversation with your doctor. It is not meant to replace one. All right, deep breath. Let's get into the first group, and it's one almost everyone already has in their medicine cabinet. I'm talking about NSAIDs, ibuprofen, naproxen, the pills you reach for when your knee acts up or your back locks after an afternoon in the garden. Here's the mechanism, and it's simpler than it sounds. These drugs work partly by narrowing certain blood vessels and telling your kidneys to hold on to more sodium and fluid. At 30, your kidneys shrug that off without a second thought. After 60, your kidneys already have less reserve capacity to begin with. So, the same dose that once passed through you completely unnoticed can now raise your blood pressure, cause swelling in your ankles, and put real strain on your heart, especially with daily use, not just an occasional pill. I think about a patient of mine, I'll call him Frank, 71, an avid golfer. He'd been taking naproxen almost daily for hip arthritis, the same brand and dose he'd used since his 50s. Over about 8 months, his blood pressure crept up, visit after visit. Nobody connected it to the naproxen until we sat down and went through his medication list, line by line. Once he switched to occasional use, paired with physical therapy for the hip itself, his numbers came back down within weeks. So here's what to actually do with this. If you take an NSAID once in a while for a headache, that's not the crisis I'm describing. The real risk shows up with daily or near daily use, stretched out over weeks and months. If that's you, ask your doctor whether acetaminophen might be a safer everyday option for your specific situation. And if you genuinely need an NSAID on a regular basis, use the lowest dose that actually works for the shortest time that gets the job done. Check your ankles at the end of the day, too. Puffiness that wasn't there before is worth mentioning at your next visit. Take a breath here for a second because I know that felt like a lot already. Most people using an occasional ibuprofen for a sore shoulder are completely fine. This is about the habit, not about the isolated pill. Picture your kidneys like a highway system. At 40, there are 6 lanes moving traffic smoothly. By 65, maybe you're down to 4 lanes. Still functional, still getting the job done, just with a lot less room for extra load. An NSAID taken daily is extra traffic on a highway that already has fewer lanes to work with. Now, let's move to something that sits in almost every kitchen cabinet in the country, the little purple pill for heartburn. I'm talking about proton pump inhibitors, medications like omeprazole. And listen, these drugs genuinely help people. Nobody's arguing that point. Here's the theory behind the caution. These medications work by shutting down acid production in your stomach. But you actually need some of that acid to properly absorb magnesium, calcium, and vitamin B12 from your food. Take one of these every single day for years, and that absorption can quietly decline. Over time, low magnesium and low B12 can affect your heart rhythm, your bone strength, even your baseline energy. Most people never connect the dots back to a heartburn pill. I had a patient, Robert, 68, who came in complaining of an irregular heartbeat and constant fatigue. Cardiology cleared him. Nothing structural, nothing dramatic on the scans. It was a routine blood panel that caught it. His magnesium was low, quietly low, the kind of low that builds over years, not weeks. He'd been on the same heartburn pill for almost a decade, prescribed for a short flare-up that never officially got revisited. Once we corrected the magnesium and adjusted his dosing, the irregular heartbeat settled down within a couple of months. So, here's the practical move, and it's a short one. If you've been on one of these for more than a few months, ask your doctor 2 things. First, can we step down to the lowest effective dose or even switch to as-needed use instead of daily? Second, can we run a simple blood test checking magnesium and B12? It's inexpensive, it takes minutes, and it tells you something real instead of leaving you guessing. One important note, though, don't just stop this medication cold turkey on your own. Your stomach can rebound with even worse acid production for a while afterward. This is a taper with guidance situation, not a quit today situation. Quick question for you, actually, before we move on. How many years have you personally been taking a heartburn medication like this one? Drop the number in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious how common long-term use really is among the people watching this. All right, group number 3. And this one hits closer to home for a lot of men over 60 who struggle with sleep. Benzodiazepines, the classic anti-anxiety and sleep medications. Names you might recognize even if you don't know the drug class by heart. The theory here is fairly straightforward. These drugs slow down your central nervous system. That's literally the point of them. Less anxiety, easier sleep, a quieter mind at 11 o'clock at night. They work by boosting a calming brain chemical called GABA. More GABA activity means a slower, quieter nervous system. That's exactly what you want at bedtime. But after 60, your body metabolizes them more slowly than it once did, which means the drug stays active in your system longer than it used to. That leftover grogginess the next morning isn't just tiredness. It's the medication still working hours after you thought it was finished. That matters more than it sounds like because slower reflexes and less steady balance mean a real increase in fall risk. And these drugs can also blunt your breathing rhythm during sleep. a genuine concern if you already deal with sleep apnea. So, what do you actually do here? Start by talking to your doctor about non drug approaches for sleep. Things like a consistent wind down routine or short term cognitive behavioral techniques can meaningfully reduce your dependence on the medication over time. And if reducing the dose ever becomes the plan, that happens slowly over weeks, guided by your doctor. Stopping this kind of medication abruptly can trigger withdrawal that's genuinely worse than the original problem. If you are currently on one of these, never combine it with alcohol, not even a single glass of wine with dinner, and pay attention to how steady you feel getting up. I just misjudged the step. That misjudgment is often the drug, not clumsiness, and definitely not just age catching up. Here's something worth sitting with for a moment. This isn't about fear. It's about noticing patterns your own body is already showing you if you're paying attention. Let it breathe for a second. You don't have to fix anything tonight. You just have to start noticing. If this video is helping connect some dots for you so far, a quick like genuinely helps other men your age find the same information. It takes about 1 second, and I do appreciate it. Group 4 is one people almost never think of as risky because you buy it without a prescription, sometimes right next to the candy at the pharmacy checkout counter. Decongestants, specifically ones containing pseudoephedrine, found in a lot of popular cold and flu combination products. The mechanism is basically right there in the name. These medications constrict blood vessels to shrink swollen tissue in your nose. The problem is, they don't just work locally in one convenient spot. They constrict blood vessels throughout your entire body, which can raise your blood pressure and add real load onto your heart, often within the same day you take them. And here's the part that catches people off guard almost every time. Many cold medicines combine a decongestant with a pain reliever and something else entirely. You can end up taking more of an ingredient than you ever realized. So before your next cold hits, actually read the label. Not just the front of the box, the actual ingredient list on the back. If you have high blood pressure or any heart condition, ask your pharmacist for a decongestant-free version. They exist, and honestly, they work almost as well for most people. Saline nasal spray, a humidifier by the bed, even just extra fluids. None of this sounds impressive, but together it takes the edge off congestion without touching your blood vessels at all. If you do take one anyway, keep an eye on your blood pressure for a day or two afterward, especially if you already monitor it at home. I've seen this one sneak up more than once. A patient with well-controlled blood pressure shows up worried because his home reading suddenly spiked for no obvious reason. 9 times out of 10, the culprit turns out to be a week-old cold and flu combo sitting in his system taken without a second thought. A stuffy nose is genuinely miserable, I get it. But there are gentler paths through a cold than reaching for the strongest thing on the shelf out of habit. Okay, short pause here because we've covered a lot of ground and I want you to actually absorb it instead of just collecting facts. 4 categories down, 1 more to go. And it's the one that's going to surprise you the most. Here's the part I really need you to pay attention to because it's a little different from everything else we've covered so far. For a good number of you watching this, what I've described won't apply in the exact same one-size-fits-all way. And that's actually the entire point of this video. Your kidney function, your other medications, your family history, even how much water you drink in an average day, all of that changes how these drugs behave inside you specifically. There is no universal safe list here, only a personalized one. Part of this comes down to genetics, actually. Your liver breaks down medication using a set of enzymes, and the speed of those enzymes varies from person to person, sometimes significantly. 2 men, same age, same weight, same prescription, can process it at noticeably different speeds. Neither one is doing anything wrong. That's just biology. And it's part of why a generic list can only take you so far, which brings me to that 5th item I mentioned at the very start, the one that might catch you most off guard. I'm talking about low-dose aspirin, taken daily purely for prevention. For decades, this was recommended almost automatically. Turn 60, add a baby aspirin, protect your heart. Simple, right? Except newer research has shifted that picture in a meaningful way. For someone who has already had a heart attack or a stroke, Daily aspirin still matters, and it should absolutely continue under medical guidance. But for someone over 60 with no prior cardiovascular event, the risk of internal bleeding, particularly in the stomach or the brain, can actually outweigh the modest preventive benefit aspirin provides. So, if you started taking aspirin years ago as a general precaution and nobody has reassessed that decision since, that conversation is overdue. Not an emergency, just overdue. I remember a patient, Walter, 63, who'd been on a daily low dose aspirin for almost 15 years. No heart attack, no stroke, no family history to speak of. He started it back when it was standard advice for basically everyone crossing 60. Nobody had ever brought it back up since. We ran the numbers together, his actual cardiovascular risk, his stomach history, his current medications. In his specific case, the bleeding risk had quietly overtaken the benefit years earlier, and nobody had noticed. That's not a story about aspirin being dangerous. It's a story about a decision that was never revisited. This is exactly why I keep repeating myself. Don't change anything on your own based on a video you watched. Bring these 5 categories to your next appointment and ask specifically about your own situation. Here's a script you can literally use word for word at your next visit. This is the piece I promised you earlier. Ask your doctor, do I still need to be on this medication at the same dose? And has my personal risk changed since we last talked about it? Most doctors genuinely welcome that question. It shows you're paying attention, and honestly, it gives them permission to reconsider a decision that might have been made years ago and simply never revisited since. Between appointments, though, you're not powerless. Your own body is constantly sending you signals if you know what to actually listen for. Unexplained fatigue that doesn't match your activity level, shortness of breath climbing stairs you used to climb without thinking, dizziness when you stand up too fast, changes in how well or how poorly you're sleeping lately, a sudden drop in your grip strength, or in how far you can walk without needing a break is worth noting too. These are small, quiet signals. Nothing dramatic, nothing that sends you to the emergency room, but they add up over months, and they're exactly the kind of thing a busy 15-minute appointment can miss unless you bring it up yourself. None of these automatically mean a medication is the cause, but they're exactly the kind of details worth mentioning to your doctor instead of quietly writing them off as just getting older. Now, I want to be honest with you about something. And this is the part most videos like this skip entirely. Everything I just gave you is a starting point, not a finish line. Roughly half of the people watching this will find that 1 or 2 of these categories genuinely apply to them. The other half will find something more complicated. 3 medications interacting with each other in ways that aren't obvious from any single list, including this one. That's not a flaw in the information. That's just how bodies over 60 actually work. More variables, more interactions, less room for guesswork. Here's a number worth knowing. Once you're regularly taking 5 or more medications, including over-the-counter ones and supplements, the odds of a meaningful drug interaction climb sharply. Not double, not triple, sharply. And most of those interactions never show up as a dramatic event. They show up as fatigue that gets blamed on age, as dizziness that gets blamed on age, as a slow decline that everyone quietly assumes is just what happens after 60. Sometimes it is just age, but sometimes it's 5 medications quietly working against each other, and nobody ever sat down to check. If you take 5 or more medications regularly, ask your doctor specifically about a full medication review, sometimes called the brown bag review, where you literally bring in every bottle you own. It sounds almost too simple to matter. It routinely catches things that would otherwise slip through for years. You don't even need the actual bottles anymore, honestly. A photo of every label on your phone works just as well, and it takes about 5 minutes the night before your appointment. Before we wrap up, I'm genuinely curious about something. Of the 5 categories we covered today, which one caught you off guard the most? Was it the aspirin, or was it something else entirely? The heartburn pill, maybe. Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If you found this useful, subscribing genuinely helps. I'm covering the next piece of this exact puzzle soon, specifically how to prepare for that medication review conversation so it doesn't feel rushed, awkward, or like you're wasting your doctor's time. I actually walked through a related piece of this in another video on how to read your own blood work panel without needing a medical degree to decode it. The link is in the description if that's useful to you. None of this is about fear. I want to say that one more time clearly because it matters. It's about walking into your next appointment a little more informed, asking one or two sharper questions, and making sure the medications that once protected you are still the ones actually helping you now. Your body at 65 is not your body at 45. That's not a failure. That's just biology doing what biology does. The medications that once protected you deserve the same attention you give a car after 100,000 miles. Not panic, just a proper checkup on schedule before something small turns into something bigger. The only real mistake is never checking back in.